I'm joined now by Pierre Martin, a political science professor at the University of Montreal. He's also a contributor to one of the largest circulating newspapers in Quebec. Thank you so much for joining us. Where do you think the U.S. is heading with an upcoming Trump presidency? Is it just another reflection of the nationalism that's happening in other countries, especially in Europe?
It's going to be very divisive, and as we can see, it hasn't really let up for these for nearly a week since he's been elected. All those protests and also gestures of aggressiveness and sometimes violence from both sides. This is a reflection of the kind of campaign that has been run, the kind of divisive campaign. Some say that because of the rhetoric that was used by the candidate, that it's only a return of the pendulum, if you will. And we saw some effort from those in charge of the main institutions, like the president and the major networks, the television networks, etc., to sort of normalize this election and to normalize this president-elect. But you can't really shut off all the people that were outraged by the kind of campaign that he led.
Well, and as you just heard, and as we're all learning, one of his new top advisors is controversial for heading a platform for racism and the far-right movement. You mentioned the rhetoric, how it's divided people. What needs to happen to bring people together, though?
It's hard to say. I mean, it will depend on the way that he conducts his administration. But then those nominations, the nomination of Steve Bannon, for example, as one of his chief strategists, is something that's very controversial and sends a very strong message that he's not really going to abandon the kind of rhetoric and the kind of divisiveness that was predominant in his campaign. When a nominee for a major position in the White House is almost unanimously criticized by most of the mainstream media, but then receives the praise from the Nazi Party and the Ku Klux Klan, this is the seeds for major divisiveness and major confrontation, and it doesn't really augur well.
But various world leaders are making outreach to Donald Trump. He heard from President Xi Jinping of China. He also spoke with Putin, other leaders. COP22 is happening right now in Morocco. What would happen if Trump pulls out of this Paris climate agreement as he has threatened? What would happen to these relationships between the United States and others around the world?
Yes, well, for the issue, for the cause of climate change control, this is disastrous because the U.S. was one of the major leaders that made this thing happen. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean, in terms of this new regime for environmental control, that everything is lost. Because if you look at, in the US, the kind of regulations that can be put together and that can be kept in force to control some, if not all, of the emissions that are done in the US, this also happens at the state level. A state like California, for example, which is not a minor contributor to greenhouse gases, does have controls and does have fairly strict policies, and these will continue. So it's not all lost, but this is a major step backwards for COP22 and this whole process of control of greenhouse gases.
All right, Pierre Martin, thank you so much for joining us from Montreal.